I think we are hugely handicapped by the geography of the Himalayas. If we want to live in peace with a communist China, we have to send signals to Beijing that it would be dangerous to meddle with us. There is no better way to dominate the Indian Ocean than with aircraft carriers. I visualize that the defense budget in 2047 is going to be not less than 400 billion.
But what is going to be the value of 400 billion in 47?
It will be less.
In the next war with China, there is Taiwan, there is the Philippines, and so much more, sir, in that area. South China Sea that you mentioned, sir. Do you think India should have its own marine corps, sir?
Personally, I would be reluctant. As a British Admiral once said, you can build a navy in 30 years, but it takes 300 years to build a tradition.
How does Chinese naval presence in Maldives actually threaten India? It's just down below, so Maldives is down below. How does it threaten us, sir? Our lines of trade, communication, supply?
They may get to the Maldives, but they have to come through the Malacca Strait. And the question is going to be, who dominates the Malacca Straits?
To ease the pressure on the Himalayas, you need to push down on the accelerator in the South China Sea. Hello friends, welcome to a brand new GAP podcast. GAP, the Gaurav Arya podcast. Thank you first of all for your love, for your affection and your feedback. We hope to do better and better. Today I come to you with another special guest, a distinguished fellow, Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and someone who wrote the Indian Navy strategy book. Rear Admiral K. Raja Menon, sir. A very warm welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And it's an honor and privilege to host you, sir.
It's great to be here.
And sir, I've heard a lot about you and I have a million questions, but we don't have time. But I'm going to go into it right away, sir.
Fire away.
Absolutely, sir. If you look at the map of India, we have the eastern seaboard, the western seaboard, sir. And I'm talking from a naval perspective. You have the South China Sea. On one hand, we have Gwadar Port, which is pretty much Chinese area, sir. For all practical purposes, it's China-owned. This is a vast expanse of maritime, if I may use the word territory, though it will be wrong. It's an area. It's pretty much the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, everything, sir. And that is the playing ground of the Indian Navy. My question is, sir, given what the Chinese are doing in Gwadar, because the Pakistani army is being built up, they do not have the funds to do it, the Chinese are doing it for them. And if you come straight down, sir, you have Maldives, where again the Chinese presence is, it's a regular presence there. So there are submarines, there are radar ships, there are other naval ships. And I'm talking here purely Navy, sir, not merchant ships, sir, purely Indian Navy. What kind of a threat is this that has emerged in the past 2 to 3 years, sir?
I would take you in a different direction. And that is that all these years since independence, we have been resource constrained. And as a result, we have been concentrating on threats to our homeland. We are now becoming a bigger power with more resources. By 2030, there are estimates out there which vary from 19 trillion of GDP to 55 trillion GDP. And in the next 20 years, the armed forces are going to have money coming out of their ears. And the nation and the government is going to want to know from the armed forces where that money is going to be spent. And the time has come for the armed forces, and particularly now that we have CDS, to formulate a tri-service strategy that will keep the peace. We need another 30 or 40 years to become a developed nation. And if we want to live in peace with a communist China, we have to send signals to Beijing that it will be dangerous to meddle with us.
Before we started this podcast, so we were sitting and we were talking about your view that we must put pressure on China in the area of the South China Sea. Now, that is pretty much China's backyard, sir, for all practical purposes. How do we have a navy that is so well equipped that it can actually cause pressure thousands of kilometers away or thousands of nautical miles away in the South China Sea? Because that's a big ask, sir. That's not a small ask.
That's right. There are two aspects here.
Sure.
One is, I want to take the audience back to the fact that the present Chinese Navy is a creation of one man, Li Huacheng, who started life as an army officer. And 1982 to 1988, he was appointed chief of the Navy. And he formulated a maritime strategy for China, which was based on a humble beginning going up to the first island chain, a more ambitious growth up to the second island chain, and finally up to the third island chain, which more or less encompasses the whole of the West Pacific. Today, the American commentators on the Chinese military strategy say that it includes a notional fifth island chain, which includes the Indian Ocean. But this issue will be decided not so much in Delhi and Beijing, but by geography. And geography shows that for the Chinese to be in the Indian Ocean, they have to come through the Malacca Straits. And Beijing has often articulated its anxiety about what they call the Malacca dilemma, which shows that they have not yet solved the problem of how they will control the Malacca Straits. Because that is a choke point where no matter what Chinese presence there is in the Indian Ocean, we can lower the trapdoor at the Malacca Straits. And the government, I must say, has probably seen this and started the development of Great Nicobar as a port, as an airfield, and that I have already written is the way to go. Because if we set up this base in the Great Nicobar, we can dominate the Malacca Straits and decide whether the Chinese will even come into the Indian Ocean. And if they come into the Indian Ocean, they will never get out.
Sir, what kind of resources do we need to make that happen? We were speaking about nuclear submarines. We were also speaking about the possibility of having larger aircraft carriers, including nuclear aircraft carriers, because we certainly have the technology, but do we have the infrastructure to build rapidly more nuclear submarines? That was my question, sir.
Very good question. Very good question. The Navy still follows what I might call the Mahanian tradition. Mahan was a maritime strategist who wrote in 1905, and by and large, his theories have not been disproved, which says that maritime nations must dominate the oceans around them. And there is no question that India, for its own safety and prosperity, must dominate the Indian Ocean. And there is no better way to dominate the Indian Ocean than with aircraft carriers. And when I say aircraft carriers, I mean large aircraft carriers. Not because large aircraft carriers are better than small aircraft carriers per se, but a large aircraft carrier embarks 4 squadrons of strike aircraft. And when an aircraft carrier of that size approaches the littoral or the coast of another country, the capital of that country, its foreign policy is influenced by the presence of a new neighbor, which is this giant aircraft carrier.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you because there is one question that is being thrown again and again, both in the mainstream media and the social media. And the question is, a lot of people who may not know what the truth is, which is why I'm asking you, sir. Even I don't know what the truth is. That an aircraft carrier is pretty much a sitting duck. You have an aircraft carrier, somebody fires a missile, poof. Is it really that simple, sir?
Not at all. An aircraft carrier is escorted by 4 to 6 destroyers. And the destroyers that escort the aircraft carrier invariably carry land attack missiles. And those land attack missiles are another potent threat. For instance, a number of questions were raised about what the Houthis are doing in Yemen, holding to ransom the waterway, the Red Sea waterway. But the answer to that comes from with the fact that today a destroyer can carry something like 35 land attack cruise missiles, which can attack pinpoint drone launching sites, the capital of countries, strategic targets, and so on. So when a carrier in the middle of the ocean, it cannot be touched in any case. But when it comes close to the littoral of another country, it becomes more dangerous for that country than the threat posed to the carrier itself.
So it's not a sitting duck, sir?
Not at all.
Now, talking about aircraft carriers, sir, and again, this is a question from a person who does not know. I'm from the Army, sir, and my exposure to the Navy is minimal at best. Now, what size of an aircraft carrier are we looking at? We've had 2 aircraft carriers now, sir. Let's say we go in for a third. Now, there are talks about 45,000 ton displacement, which would be diesel electrical combined, I would assume, sir. Or non-nuclear, if I may put it that way, sir.
I see that we were constrained again by resources at one stage in our development. But the Cochin shipyard, for instance, is designed to take ships up to 100,000 tons. So really, we're not constrained in building a carrier of a much larger size. And a larger carrier carries more strike aircraft. And strike aircraft are, 4 squadrons of strike aircraft are lethal.
Which is, what's 18 into 4, sir?
80,000 tons.
No, sir. 80,000 tons is how many to a squadron? How many fighter aircraft to a squadron, sir, in the Navy? Because the Air Force says 16 or 18. Sir.
Yeah, same.
Same, sir.
Same.
So let's say 18 into 4, sir.
Yes.
4 squadrons, 18 into 4.
Yeah, 70 aircraft. When a platform of 70 aircraft approaches the littoral of another nation, that nation acquires a new neighbor. And this is what is called the influence of sea power on states.
It's a floating city for all practical
It's a floating city.
All right, sir. So let's say you're saying that the Cochin shipyard is capable, or at least has the infrastructural wherewithal to get started on a 100,000 ton aircraft carrier. And of course, we have the capability. We're building nuclear submarines, which is my next question, sir. But we're building nuclear submarines, and we could sort of have a nuclear powered aircraft carrier or 100,000 ton displacement. Now, coming to nuclear submarines, sir, are we lagging behind?
Yes. I'm afraid we are lagging behind, relatively speaking, because we have commissioned ballistic missile launching submarines very successfully. And the nuclear submarine building line has so far been devoted to turning out ballistic missile submarines because the nation needs it. The nation needs a nuclear deterrent. And as the doctrine quite clearly states in 2003, we are reliant on a second strike capability. Second strike, the best second strike, is a sea launch deterrent. So the nuclear submarine production line has so far been taken up by the production of SSBNs, which are naval parlance for missile submarines. But the other lethal platform in maritime warfare is the attack submarine, the nuclear attack submarine. And if we want to get Beijing's attention and discourage them from making claims on Arunachal Pradesh, when our governments are trying to negotiate a line of actual control, I mean, that is a very aggressive move. And if we want to dissuade Beijing from making claims of that kind, we have to exert a threat that Beijing cannot ignore.
To lift the pressure off from the Himalayas, there should be pressure in the seas, is what you're saying, sir.
Absolutely right.
And nothing can do it better than a nuclear attack submarine.
A nuclear attack submarine. And that is the basis of what I might call, what we need to do, a tri-service military grand strategy.
Right, sir. I'll come to the tri-services strategy and also theaterization, sir. That is amongst the questions that I have in mind for you, sir. Now, how many nuclear attack submarines do we need? Because we are a country that is on a certain growth trajectory, but we are not there yet. Yes. We are not a developed country. We can't write $100-200 billion checks like that. It's not possible right now because we have other responsibilities, even though we may have the money, but it's to be spread out amongst other expenditures also. Question is, sir, how many should we have, aircraft carrier and nuclear attack submarines, sir?
Between 2024 and 2047, the defense budget will grow at least 6 times.
6 times, sir?
6 times. I visualize that the defense budget in 2047 is going to be not less than 400 billion.
But what is going to be the value of 400 billion in 47?
It'll be less.
It'll be less.
Yes, it'll certainly be less. So 400 billion in 2047 won't get you what it'll get you today.
Sure.
But with 400 billion, the naval budget, for instance, is going to be 80 billion.
Sure.
The aircraft carrier built recently by the UK, 60,000 tons, came out at $4 billion.
That's not too expensive, sir.
That's not expensive. That's not expensive. Not anymore when you got 80 billion.
Sure.
But the other aspect is that I think we are lagging behind. Or we will be lagging behind in 2047 if we don't churn out nuclear attack submarines.
How many, sir?
I would visualize that we need not less than 16 nuclear attack submarines to maintain at least 4 SSNs on patrol in the South China Sea, armed with land attack cruise missiles.
Something like the Tomahawk that you were mentioning, sir.
Something like the Tomahawk. An SSN that we operate in the mid-21st century should have vertical launch tubes, not less than 12, apart from being able to fire land attack cruise missiles through the torpedo tube.
So we have BrahMos on certain destroyers, sir.
Yeah, but BrahMos is a different kind of missile.
Yes, sir.
What we need are land attack cruise missiles, are more like the Nirbhaya. I'm not very clear about the exact capabilities of the Nirbhaya, but that's the way to go.
Sure.
And they must enable the platform to remain 500 kilometers offshore and strike targets inland 1,000 kilometers deep. And remember one thing, that in the South China Sea, we are dealing with one of the world's most advanced scientific powers. And we need to up our game.
Absolutely. Sir, about theaterization, something that you've touched upon and you've written about it, and you were in fact telling me how the Americans had gone about it, because there was a lot of objection from various services that no this, and it's bound to be this, and no service will want to compromise. What it says.
Yes.
They will not want to compromise, and there is this sense of tough. Let's be honest about it. There is a sense of tough, sir.
Yes.
How do the Americans do it, and how should we do it, sir?
Armed forces are highly professional. And part of that professional ethos is that they believe that they can win the war. Often, mistakenly, win the war single-handed. Now, that is what the two senators in the United States sought to attack. They were the Goldwater Nichols, who brought in a reform in the American armed forces, which makes it impossible for an American service officer to go very far in his service unless he has completed 2 or 3 tri-service appointments. And they virtually brought the armed forces together and created an integrated joint services command. So we are going that way.
We are going that way, sir?
Yeah, we're going that way.
So let's say there is a 1-star, sir, and he has to become a 2-star in any of these services.
Yes.
So you're saying that according to the Americans, the criteria then was that after this act, sir, is that you've got to have, let's say, a posting maybe to the army.
Or That's right. That's right. Not necessarily with the army, but a tri-service appointment.
A tri-service appointment. Sir.
So a lot of appointments will be tri-service.
Sure.
And the upper echelons of the Joint Services Command will be held by officers whose career pattern shows a clear number of postings in tri-service appointments.
Without that, they're not going to cut it, sir.
They're not going very far.
So, because then this is a top-down approach, sir.
That's right.
That the government desires.
That's right.
And so it is done. Because I believe that there were a lot of objections from the American services also, sir. US services, because turf, because of XYZ, sir. So this is you've explained how the Americans did it finally, sir, through an act.
Yes.
How are the Indians doing it, sir?
Well, we don't really need an act. We already have tri-service institutions like the Defense Services Staff College. Sure. Wonderful institution. Sure. And the war colleges, which are for 42-year-olds, sure, are populated by officers from the other services.
Yes, sir.
And the NDC is a tri-service institution.
Yes, sir.
So we already have a tri-service. And basically, in our formative years, we have tri-service training at the NDA. So the Americans still don't have that. So we look very fondly back at our days when we grew up with our colleagues in the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and so on. So we have that culture already. So I don't think we will need Goldwater Nichols in India. This is a reform that certainly can be brought about by the Ministry of Defense.
So you have these theatre commands, sir?
Yes.
That will have to be there, sir?
Yes.
And then you have the chiefs?
Yes.
Who are going to be in terms of more of a supporting, in terms of resource
providers.
And supply chains and everything else, which is so crucial for war. And then on top of the theatre commanders, you have the CDS.
That's right.
But the theatre commanders are 4-stars, sir.
Theatre commanders should be 4-star and the CDS should be 5-star. And I must tell you that I have already worked at my own level on a theatre command structure. Sure. And sent it to the CDS. Sure. About 2 years ago. Right, I understand that they have looked at it, sure, but I haven't received any feedback as yet.
Sure. But you're saying that the CDS needs to be a 5-star, of course, because you can't have these whole lot of 4-stars, sir. This theatre command and that theatre command, and the person on top also being a 4-star. There will be problems. So
that's right. There will be something like 12 to 14 4-stars who must be commanded by somebody. Somebody, sir. And he has to be a 5-star.
So 7 theatre commands, sir?
No.
You're talking about how many theatre commands, sir?
5 theatre commands. 5 theatre commanders, 3 armed forces, sir, and 1 or 2 other 4-star appointments.
So you need a 5-star.
You need a 5-star.
Sir, from this, I want to shift to something more operational in nature, sir. Yeah. So these are strategic discussions. For a very long time, sir, I read a lot and I try to keep myself updated. And one service that the Americans are very proud of, justifiably so, are the US Marine Corps, sir.
That's right.
And we don't have anything like the US Marine Corps, though we have the Marcos, but Marcos is a special force in the Navy, sir. That's a special force.
That's right. It's a commando organization.
It's a commando organization and strategic goals and go for a mission, come back, that sort of thing, sir. But if we see our backyard, sir, and I'm talking here specifically about the eastern part, sir, right up, Japan is there, sir, China is there, Indonesia, and a whole lot of countries, Australia down below, sir. In the next war with China, there is Taiwan, there is the Philippines, and so much more, sir, in that area. South China Sea that you mentioned, sir. Do you think India should have its own Marine Corps, sir?
It's a very difficult question you asked. Personally, I would be reluctant. I would be reluctant because I've grown up to respect the Indian Army. I think it's a fine service.
Sure.
And the Navy had received nothing but support and generosity from the Indian Army.
Sure.
As a British Admiral once said, you can build a Navy in 30 years, but it takes 300 years to build a tradition. What the Indian Army has is tradition. It has a very fine tradition of regimental services which harks back to successful battles fought over 200 years.
Sure.
And I wouldn't meddle with that. So you can start a different Marine Corps with a different uniform, with its own weapons. But where do you go for that tradition which will be lacking? You can always take a brigade or two of the Indian Army and give them what we call wet shot training in the Andamans or in Trivandrum.
It's terrible to be on a ship, sir. Ask me. It's terrible to be on a ship, sir. I had an opportunity, sir.
Yes.
And it's not easy, sir.
I know.
I'm happier on land.
I know. But I'm sure that the Indian Army has ways of overcoming physical discomfort.
Sea legs, you call them, sir. Sea legs.
Sea legs, yes.
Sea legs, you call
Sea
them.
legs.
Sir.
And I mean, today you're quite right that the US Marine Corps has a very fine tradition.
Sir.
But that tradition was acquired through humongous battles.
Sir.
But we already have a force which has that tradition. I think we should use them.
So, a brigade or two or three from the army.
That's right.
With sea legs.
Yes.
Under command, whoever is the officer there or whoever is the theatre commander.
Yes.
And then for all these beachhead operations, etc., etc. So
Yeah, that doctrine is already exists.
already there, sir. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
already there.
the Andaman and Nicobar Theatre Command is
Yes.
already doing it. But you're saying there should be an expansion of this.
Yeah,
obviously.
there is in fact an amphibious warfare capsule in the Defence Services Staff College,
Sure.
where the command and control of amphibious operations are very clearly laid down. So we already have all that.
Sir. We are at 1.9% of the GDP as far as our defense budget goes, sir.
Yes.
And it's not sufficient because a lion's share of that goes to paying salaries and pensions.
That's right.
And we do not have enough for capital asset acquisition, sir.
That's right.
How much is sufficient today, sir? I mean, we might have a humongous budget maybe later on, but the threat is today, sir. I was speaking to an Air Force officer, and he said that, and I would like to paraphrase that for the Navy, sir, because he said that I absolutely support Atmanirbharta. I think it should be there, but the AMCS, sir, our fifth generation fighters for the Indian Air Force, they will see the light of day in 2038, 2040, sir. But today, as we speak, China has J-20 fifth generation stealth fighters deployed on the Tibetan plateau, sir, and they're churning them out like cookies, sir.
Yes.
It's like they're saying we'll have 1,000 stealth fighters. Can we afford to wait that long? So now paraphrasing it for the Navy, sir, what are the assets that the Chinese Navy or the PLA Navy has that we do not have, which we need to build on? We've spoken about nuclear attack submarines, sir. We've spoken about aircraft carriers. What else, sir?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think our weakness today is combat aircraft. And that is not only a weakness with us, but there are very few countries in the world that produce modern combat aircraft. And the Navy will be dependent on acquisitions as far as the aircraft for the aircraft carriers are concerned. I don't think that is an issue we can get over in the next 10 or 15 years.
So the Chinese are in Maldives, sir. For all practical purposes, they've taken over 36 islands from the Maldives and they own the country, sir. Now, it's too late because Maldives has taken that much money from the Chinese and they can't do anything about it. How does Chinese naval presence in Maldives actually threaten India? It's just down below. So Maldives is down below. How does it threaten us, sir? Our lines of trade, communication, supply. What can they pressurize? How are they threatening us?
I would like to commend the government for their farsightedness in developing Great Nicobar. Because the Chinese admit that they have, as I said, this Malacca dilemma. They may get to the Maldives, but they have to come through the Malacca Straits. And they have to go out through the Malacca Straits. And the question is going to be, who dominates the Malacca Straits? And that is an issue on which we must have a tri-service strategy. Frankly, I would like to see the Air Force probably accept a sub-strategy of an expeditionary role and establish a base on Great Nicobar.
The Indian Air Force, sir?
The Indian Air Force.
Couple of squadrons, sir?
Couple of squadrons. Along with an Indian large aircraft carrier, which will make the Malacca Straits an Indian strait. And as long as we do that, Beijing will get the message that they can play around as much as they like in the Maldives, but we call the shots.
People say putting Air Force squadrons on an island is almost like a stationary aircraft carrier. So if you can support it there,
yes,
and you have a couple of squadrons there, fighter squadron, let's say we have two squadrons of Rafales there, sir. Indian Air Force says that Sukhoi is there. Just park there inside their hangars or inside whatever they want to park them in, and then they take off and they can hit targets inside China. So that is something to be considered. So what is the tri-services strategy that you're so passionate about?
This is an old issue where the Air Force believes that they have the range as far as the Su-30s are concerned. But we are talking about 24/7 air power, air dominance. And that can come only from bases. Now, this is an issue which I would like to coax our colleagues in Air Force Blue into accepting as part of the cost of becoming a great power. A great power has bases.
Then they'll talk about squadron strength, sir. Because their squadron strength authorized 42, they are at 32, sir.
Well, as I said, there's going to be a lot of money in the next 25 years. And I'm not sure that I can speak for the Air Force. I wouldn't for a moment speak for the Air Force.
Sure.
The Air Force, they are masters of their own environment. But sooner or later, we have to cobble together a tri-service strategy. And there's got to be some give and take. Somebody's got to give, somebody's got to take. And I think we are hugely handicapped by the geography of the Himalayas.
Why do you say so, sir?
Because there are only 5 or 6 axes where you can go up the Himalayas and reinforce the Chinese front. But that's not the case with the Chinese.
Oh, plateau and down.
Plateau and down.
Okay. I am sure. Sir.
And the Chinese can move. Unfortunately, there is this thing called high altitude acclimatization. The Chinese can move acclimatized troops along a 6-lane highway from the Tri-junction,
Yes, sir.
all the way to Aksai Chin. So they are able to reinforce any point along the border very easily with acclimatized troops, whereas we can't.
You just put them in a vehicle and go.
That's right.
That's how the Chinese do it.
That's what the Chinese do.
But we are not able to do it because of geography, sir.
Because of geography. And that's the reason why the Navy will, at some stage, resource permitting, have to get their feet wet in the South China Sea.
So, Navy getting its feet wet in the South China Sea, essentially the same thing that you have said before, sir. To ease the pressure in the Himalayas, you need to push down on the accelerator in the South China Sea.
That's right. We need to influence Beijing's foreign and defense policy.
And their decision making also, sir.
And their decision making.
To a very large extent. Sir, we've had a history of taking weapons, taking aircraft, buying ships from Russia. Now, with the Russia and Ukraine war, it does not seem to be ending, sir, though many people are saying that there are diplomatic forays being made and maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel, but not today, sir, not today. What is the dependency of the Indian Navy on the Russians, sir, today?
I think the best answer I can give you is that we are contemplating building this new class of destroyer called the Type 18. And it's going to be a big destroyer, over 10,000 tons.
Oh, okay, sir.
And there is very little content in it from Russia.
So it's mostly indigenous?
Yes. So I think as far as indigenous ship construction is concerned, we have licked the problem. Although, even as I say this, we are getting 2 frigates from Russia. But that's because the Indian shipbuilding yards are full up. Not because we can't build the ships.
We have our hands full, sir.
We have our hands full.
Every shipyard, sir.
Shipyard is full.
Full, sir. Sir, this is my last question today, sir, and I would request you to answer at length because this is something that I have not been able to wrap my head around and I have not been able to figure this out at all in spite of reading whatever is available, sir, material. There are asymmetric threats. I never thought that the Indian Navy would get involved like it did, Somalian pirates, Houthis.
Right.
Now, you're not fighting against a navy, sir. These are amorphous. They come in a boat and they do all of that, sir. Yes. And the Indian Navy has acquitted itself wonderfully. Yes. But that is also because of their adaptability in their training, sir. Yes. It is not that they're training for this, but it's their adaptability. They know they're professionals and they'll be able to solve the problem. Right. Do you see such bodies like the Somalian pirates or the Houthis being used as proxies? I'm saying different countries trying to use them as proxies, like Pakistan uses the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed. They are land-based terror organizations. Let us assume a sea-based terror organization, which is pretty much what the Houthis are, sir. They're sea-based and they stop your trade, and maritime trade is one of the big responsibilities of the Indian Navy to provide safe passage, sir. Yeah. How do you think the Indian Navy, I would request for a detailed answer, sir, how would the Indian Navy solve this problem, these asymmetric threats coming from the sea?
Well, actually, as far as the Navy is concerned, it hasn't been asymmetric all that long. We have participated in the Somalia patrol and done very well. One of the weapons which will be useful against countries using their homeland to project militancy will be, as I said, the land attack cruise missile, apart from AIPA.
Very accurate, sir?
Very accurate. Very accurate. Extremely accurate. It has the digital area scene correlation in the terminal head, which enables to virtually fly through a window. And the one country that has faced this problem in the last 20 years are the Americans. And the Americans have fired 2,500 cruise missiles in the last 25 years as part of their foreign policy. When they fire them in Syria, they fire them in Iraq, they fire them in Yemen. So, apart from threatening literal nations with aircraft carriers. So, this is a game that the Navy has been in for quite a long time.
So the Navy knows, sir, what it's up
the
against.
The Navy is aware of that counter strategy.
Sir, now the absolutely last question, sir. I promised this would be the last, but one more, sir, with your permission. About this whole tri-services thing and the jointness piece and the theaterization piece, sir. Now, from an officer perspective, sir, let us say, let's assume Area 15 Corps, so which looks after Kashmir Valley, sir. We already have parts of the Navy, sir, they're operating there, the Marcos, but I'm talking about the general officer cadre of the Navy, sir. Do you think there is scope that maybe in terms of a posting or a transfer, you have Navy officers or Air Force officers actually going and sitting in 15 Corps or 16 Corps or 14 Corps in Ladakh, sir, for the sake of exposure, because there are so many things in the army for which you may not require immediate army tactical or operational experience. Military experience is enough. Do you think that will also help, sir? Maybe not tri-services in the true sense, but just go and maybe be there with the army for some time, and the army people to be there, let's say an army officer, the rank of a major, sir, a young major, 8-10 years of experience. You know, he goes on INS Kochi or some other ship and he is posted there with the Navy. Do you think that will also give some sort of an exposure to what the Navy is, sir?
I don't see the merit, the immediate benefit to either the host service or the visiting service in your scheme. Integration has to take place at a higher level. Integration at the tactical level doesn't seem all that attractive to me. I think at the tactical level, it's a very highly specialized form of warfare, which is better left to the specialists.
So we'll leave it at that, sir. I've understood what you're trying to say. And that's all, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we spoke to sir and he spoke about so many things. He spoke about, the threats facing India, the eastern seaboard, the western seaboard. We spoke about the Malacca dilemma of the Chinese, how many nuclear attack submarines we need. We spoke about attack aircraft. We spoke about aircraft carriers. We also spoke about, maybe should India have a Marine Corps? Should India not have a Marine Corps? And all of those questions were answered brilliantly. Sir, thank you for coming on our podcast, sir.
Not at all. Pleasure.
It was a pleasure and honor for us, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
It's a great opportunity for a retired officer to spout his views to someone who will listen.
Very kind of you to say that, sir. And thank you very much, sir. And Jai Hind to you, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
Not at all.